You know, Japan's conveyor belt sushi scene, right? Plates gliding by, super affordable prices, maybe a robot delivering your miso soup.
Yeah, it feels fun, accessible.
But behind the scenes, it's an absolute pressure cooker, a brutal fight for market share with these razor-thin margins.
Oh, absolutely. It's an industry where, like, every single cost matters. Knowing how to source your tuna or price a special roll better than the next guy, that can make or break you.
Efficiency is everything.
Right. Innovation too, but efficiency is just paramount.
And this intense environment is really the backdrop for a wild story we're diving into today. It's all centered on alleged data theft between two major players, Hama Sushi and Kappa Sushi.
Yeah, we've gathered a bunch of sources here. There are news reports covering the whole thing, the criminal investigation, arrests, the court verdict against a former executive, and even a massive civil lawsuit that's still, ongoing.
And we also have articles that really help unpack the industry context and what this whole mess means for, well, data security today.
So our goal here is to go beyond just the headlines. We want to understand what exactly happened, who was involved, what the courts decided, and maybe most importantly, what does this tell us about the hidden pressures of competition?
And corporate ethics too, right?
Yeah.
And whether companies are actually doing enough to protect their really valuable information.
Exactly. It's a deep dive into this high-stakes corporate rivalry played out with sushi, basically.
We'll be focusing on some key figures, particularly this guy, Koki Tanabe. He was the president of Kappa Create, that's the company behind Kappa Sushi, but, and this is crucial, he had a significant history before that.
Right, at Hama Sushi's parent company, Zensho Holdings.
Yeah, and there's also mention of a product manager at Kappa, Mr. Otomo, and an unnamed former colleague of Tanabe's back at Hama Sushi.
So buckle up. This story involves accusations of betrayal, millions of yen on the line. It's quite something.
Okay, let's start right at the heart of it then. What kind of information are we actually talking about? What was allegedly stolen?
Yeah, this is important because it wasn't just, looking over someone's shoulder at a menu.
No, the sources are pretty specific about what Hama Sushi claimed was taken.
They are. The core allegation involves trade secrets from Hama Sushi, and we're talking seriously sensitive stuff here.
Like what specifically?
Okay, so cost data, with the actual procurement and purchase prices for foodstuffs, fish, rice, vinegar, all the crucial ingredients.
Wow.
Supplier data too, who they were buying from, plus internal earnings statements and detailed sales data covering about 500 of Hama Sushi's restaurants.
Okay, so not just what they sell, but exactly what it costs them to make it, who they buy it from, and how well specific locations are doing. That's deep.
It's incredibly deep. And in the conveyor belt sushi world, where, like you said, margins are incredibly tight, some sources put the cost to sales ratio around 40%. This kind of data is, well, it's pure gold.
Right. Knowing a rival's exact costs gives you immense leverage.
Totally. You could potentially undercut their prices, maybe negotiate harder with your own suppliers because you know what Hama's paying. You could tailor your product development, your store strategies, all based on their internal performance data.
It's basically knowing the precise financial levers of your direct competitor.
Exactly. You can see why Hama Sushi would be so upset.
Makes total sense why that data would be so critical. So who are the companies actually squaring off here?
Okay, so on one side, you have Hama Sushi, the alleged victim. They're part of this massive Zensho Holdings group, a major force in Japanese food service.
Okay.
On the other side is Kappa Sushi, operated by Kappa Create. Now, Kappa actually pioneered the whole conveyor belt sushi thing way back when.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but by the time this all went down, they'd fallen behind the competition. They were sitting in fourth place.
And the key figure connecting them is Koki Tanabe. Tell us a bit more about his background. He wasn't exactly new to this world, was he?
Oh, far from it. Tanabe had this really significant career history with Zensho, Hama Sushi's parent company. He joined back in 1998, right after university.
Okay.
And he rose really rapidly through the ranks. By his early 30s, he was already general manager of the corporate planning office.
Wow.
Yeah. Then he served as a director at Hama Sushi itself from 2014 to 2017. And he even led other Zensho group companies, Jolly Pasta, Coco's, as president.
So definitely someone on the fast track at a major corporation. So he was doing well there.
Absolutely. The sources describe him as highly capable, fast-tracked by Zensho, reportedly earning a very comfortable salary, too, something like 50 million yen a year.
That's quite a bit. So
Yeah.
why the move?
Well, that's part of the story. He transitioned, pretty abruptly it seems, over to Kappa Create. First in an advisory role, November 2020.
Okay.
Then, boom, vice president in December 2020. And just a couple of months later, February 2021, he's president.
Whoa, that's a meteoric rise at
A
Kappa.
very rapid ascent. And that move really sets the stage for the alleged data theft.
Right, so how did the timeline of these events actually unfold, according to the sources?
Okay, the critical period seems to be around September, maybe October 2020. This is when Tanabe allegedly got his hands on that sensitive data. We talked about the purchase prices, business partners, procurement info, sales data.
And this was happening right around the time he was making the move from Zensho Hama Sushi to Kappa Create.
Exactly, just before or maybe just after the transition. And the allegations include that he got help from a former subordinate who was still working at Hama Sushi.
Okay, so the data is allegedly obtained. What happens next, once he's actually at Kappa?
So the timeline suggests that in December 2020, after he'd officially joined Kappa Create, he allegedly told Mr. Otomo, that product manager at Kappa, to use this Hama Sushi data
To do what with it?
to create comparative cost tables. Basically, lay out Hama Sushi's costs right next to Kappa Sushi's costs and see exactly where they stood, where the differences were.
Trying to find an edge using the stolen info.
That's the allegation.
And how did Hama Sushi find out about this? Did the subordinate confess?
The sources say Hama Sushi discovered the data leak in January 2021 during their own internal investigation. Doesn't specify exactly how, but they found out.
And that discovery is what kicked things off legally.
Yep. That led them to file a complaint with the police. They cited Japan's unfair competition prevention law.
Which then triggered a formal police investigation.
Exactly. So June 2021, based on that complaint, the police conducted searches, including at Kappa Create's headquarters.
Must have been tense.
Oh, I imagine so. The investigation went on for over a year. And then September 30th, 2022, that's when Koki Tanabe was arrested by Tokyo police.
Okay.
Along with another Kappa executive and that Hama Sushi employee who allegedly helped him get the data.
So multiple arrests.
Yes. And the police also reportedly sought action against Kappa Create itself, like as a corporate entity, for a violation.
Wow. How did Kappa Create react publicly to their new president being arrested?
Well, pretty quickly, within days, October 3rd, 2022, Kappa Create announced Tanabe had resigned.
Okay. And they stated they'd be enhancing compliance training, the usual corporate response. The president at the time, a Mr. Yamakato, also publicly commented that he didn't believe intense competition was the root cause of the issue.
Interesting deflection, maybe. So the arrests lead to a criminal trial for Tanabe. We got a verdict in May 2023. What did the court decide?
The Tokyo District Court found Koki Tanabe guilty of violating the unfair competition prevention law.
And the sentence.
Judge Kichi Hirade handed down 3 years in prison, but suspended for 4 years, plus a 2 million yen fine.
Suspended sentence. So he didn't actually go to prison immediately.
Correct. The prosecution had actually asked for 4 years imprisonment, no suspension mentioned in what we read, but the judge went with the suspended sentence.
Did the judge say why Tanabe did this? What was the motive?
Yeah, the judge's comments were pretty pointed, actually. Described Tanabe's motive as selfish and profit-driven.
Profit for Kappa or for himself? The judge implied it was about Tanabe elevating his own status and reputation at Kappa Create by using the stolen info. Said there was no room for leniency regarding the motive itself. Pretty harsh words.
And did the court agree with Hama Sushi that this data was actually a trade secret? Because sometimes that's a high bar to clear.
Yes, they did. The judge found that the data did constitute a trade secret under the law. The ruling noted it was highly useful for Hama Sushi's business, reflected their strategic thinking on products and suppliers.
And could seriously help rivals.
Right. Could improve their own development, their sourcing. It had that specific competitive value the law is designed to protect.
But still, the sentence was suspended. Why not actual prison time if the motive was selfish and the data was a trade secret?
Yeah, that's the key point. The main reason the judge cited for suspending the sentence was the lack of concrete damage proven to have occurred as a direct result of the data theft.
Ah, okay. So Hama Sushi couldn't show, we lost X million yen because they used this specific cost data.
Apparently not to the court's satisfaction in the criminal trial. The potential for harm was clear, the court acknowledged that, but specific, measurable financial damage directly linked to the theft, that wasn't demonstrated sufficiently for immediate imprisonment.
Got it. So a criminal conviction for Tanabe, a fine, a suspended sentence, but that's just one part of the legal fallout, isn't it?
Exactly. The criminal case focuses on the individual's actions and breaking the law, but the civil side, that deals with the alleged harm to the company.
And Hama Sushi didn't let that drop.
No, they didn't. In December 2023, Zensho Holdings, the parent company, really escalated things by filing a civil lawsuit.
Okay, who were they suing in the civil case? Just Tanabe.
They sued Kappa Create as a corporation, Koki Tanabe individually, and also another unnamed entity.
What were they asking for? This must be where the big money comes in.
Oh, yeah. Zensho is seeking a significant amount, 500 million yen in damages. That's roughly, what, 3 to 4 million US dollars, depending on the exchange rate?
$500 million yen, that's serious.
Yeah. And interestingly, they claimed in the filing that their total losses from the whole incident are actually much, much higher. They put the figure at over 6.3 billion yen.
Whoa. That's a huge difference. Why only sue for 500 million then?
The sources don't really explain that discrepancy. Could be strategic, could be related to what they think they can realistically prove or recover. But yeah, massive claim losses.
And besides the money, were they asking for anything else?
Yes. They also demanded the disruption of all the information that was allegedly taken. Make sure it can't be used physically or digitally purged.
So, scrubbing the data. Did Kappa Create have anything to say when this massive civil suit landed?
At the time the reports came out, Kappa Create basically gave a no comment. They stated they couldn't comment specifically because they hadn't yet formally received the complaint paperwork. Standard legal posture, really.
Okay. This entire saga, it just seems so deeply rooted in how incredibly fierce the competition is in that Japanese conveyor-belt sushi industry. We should probably spend a moment on that landscape.
Yeah, it's almost an understatement to call it competitive. You've got Sushiro as the current dominant player, the big leader.
Right.
But then you have Hama Sushi, Kura Sushi, and Kappa Sushi just locked in this constant, relentless battle for the spots right below them. Number 2, 3, 4. It's tight.
And it's a market where tiny advantages matter.
Right.
Right, like you said, pricing, sourcing.
Exactly, or a slightly better customer experience, a gimmick that works. It can all make a difference when margins are so thin.
And Kappa Sushi specifically, they had a reason to be, let's say, aggressive.
Yeah.
Given their market position.
Oh, definitely. Remember, Kappa was the pioneer, the original leader way back, but they'd fallen significantly behind by the 2000s.
Right, you said fourth place.
Fourth place when Tanabe joined. So they were desperately trying to regain market share, claw back profitability. There was likely immense pressure on the leadership.
Including a brand new president like Tanabe.
Absolutely. Pressure to deliver results, turn the company around, and probably do it quickly. That context is important.
And that pressure, it probably connects back to the motivation the judge highlighted in the criminal trial, the selfish, profit-driven part.
It seems likely they're linked, yeah.
Yeah.
It's presented in the sources as a significant factor. Here's this guy, Tanabe, impressive background, treated well at Zensho, high salary.
Yeah.
But maybe the intense pressure to perform at Kappa, maybe combined with what the judge called that selfish desire for personal status and reputation there,
Yeah.
it potentially contributed to his alleged actions.
One source even described him as a strong manager, but maybe one who sometimes went against the rules.
Yeah, results-oriented, perhaps to a fault. And then there's that really strong element of betrayal that one article discussed.
Right, that word stood out.
It really captures the ethical dimension, doesn't it? Tanabe wasn't just some random employee jumping ship. He was a senior executive at the parent company of Hama Sushi.
Yeah, he knew the inside workings.
Exactly. So moving to a direct, struggling rival, and then allegedly using highly sensitive proprietary information from your former employer, it's seen as a really serious breach of trust, of business ethics.
Especially given his seniority.
Definitely. And one source made an interesting comparison. It contrasted this situation with, say, the U.S., where non-compete clauses in contracts are much more common, especially for executives.
So agreements specifically stopping you from joining a direct competitor for a certain period.
Right. The article highlighted that in Japan, those kinds of formal agreements preventing this exact type of movement and the potential information leakage that comes with it are less common.
Which makes internal controls and just basic trust even more critical, I guess.
Precisely. If the legal guardrails aren't always there in the same way, the ethical and internal security ones become paramount.
Okay, let's maybe zoom out a bit from the sushi specifics now. What does this case teach us, or, any business really, about protecting confidential information in today's world?
Well, I think this case is a really sharp illustration of the risks, especially when key employees move between competitors, particularly in these fast-paced, data-driven industries.
It definitely highlights the need for companies to think maybe beyond just the traditional security measures.
I agree. And remember that defense argument, that Hama Sushi's data wasn't sufficiently protected, even though the court ultimately rejected it for the trade secret ruling itself.
And still raises a valid point, right, about data security practices.
Absolutely. It forces us to look critically at how companies are actually securing their data. And the sources sort of implicitly discuss two really critical layers of data security that companies need.
Okay, what are those two layers?
So the first layer is pretty standard, access restriction, basically controlling who can even view the sensitive data in the first place.
Like user permissions, passwords, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And Hama Sushi likely had some level of this. Maybe only certain finance or planning people could access that cost data, like that former subordinate who allegedly helped Tanabe.
Right. But in this case, someone with legitimate access allegedly just took it or shared it.
Precisely. And that is where the second, absolutely crucial layer comes in, file security itself.
Okay, what does that mean?
It involves measures like encryption or something called information rights management, IRM. These technologies essentially make the content of the file unreadable unless you are an authorized user with the right key or permissions.
Ah, so even if someone gets the file.
Even if someone gets their hands on the file itself, maybe they email it out, copy it to a USB stick, upload it to personal cloud storage, like the sources suggest might have happened here, it's useless to them.
Because they can't open it or read what's inside?
Exactly. If that Hama Sushi data file had been strongly encrypted or protected with IRM tied to Hama Sushi systems, even if the subordinate sent it, Tanabe and anyone else at Kappa wouldn't have been able to actually open it and use that valuable information inside. The file itself might travel, but the secret stays locked.
Okay, so it's like locking the front door isn't enough. If someone inside has the key and can just hand over the filing cabinet, you need to make the documents inside the cabinet unreadable to anyone who shouldn't see them.
That's a perfect analogy. You really need both. Restrict access to minimize the opportunities for leakage in the first place, yes. But also secure the data itself so that if, despite your best efforts, a file is improperly obtained, it remains unusable garbage to the thief.
And that seems especially important now with remote work, people using personal devices sometimes.
Totally. The data perimeter is just much more fluid. You have to protect the data wherever it might go.
It sounds like this scandal also points to some maybe broader governance issues within this whole highly competitive sushi industry too.
It does seem that way. We looked at a Nikkei Asia article that explicitly connected this data theft incident to potentially damaging the entire industry's reputation. Yeah, and it highlighted governance challenges that might be driven by that intense competition. It even mentioned, as a separate but related example, that issue involving Sushiro misleading customers about promotions.
Oh, right. I remember that. Different kind of problem, but
Different problem, yeah, not data theft. But the article framed both as examples of governance possibly slipping under the intense pressure cooker environment of that market.
this case really has been a deep dive, hasn't it, into this complex mix of like intense business rivalry, alleged corporate espionage, critical legal questions, ethical questions.
Absolutely. We've gone from the really specific details like stolen spreadsheets in the world of conveyor belt sushi all the way through criminal arrests, a court verdict, and now this ongoing multi-million-dollar civil suit.
Yeah. And along the way, we've seen the intense pressures that seem unique to that specific market.
We have. And the legal ramifications, both for the individual, Tanabe, and for the companies involved in these trade secret cases, and maybe the most universal lesson. The absolute necessity for businesses today, really any business, to implement robust, multi-layered data security. Security that protects the actual content of their most valuable information, not just who has access to the files.
It really makes you think, though, about the real cost of that kind of cutthroat competition. Because it's sometimes paid not just in, market share battles or lower profits, but actually in the erosion of trust and ethical boundaries.
That's a heavy question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much responsibility do companies have? Not just to install the technical defenses for their data, the encryption and stuff, but to actually cultivate a culture where employees, even the ones under immense pressure to deliver, feel they don't need to cross those ethical lines to succeed.
That's a really important point. Culture versus compliance.
It is. Definitely something worth mulling over long after we wrap up here.